Rome wasn't supposed to fall. For over 1,000 years, it ruled with unmatched power, culture, and military might. Its legions marched across 3 continents. Its laws shaped civilizations. Its roads stretched beyond the horizon. And yet, this unstoppable empire crumbled. But why? Most people think it was all about invading barbarians or mad emperors fiddling while Rome burned. But the truth? It's far messier and way more interesting. Behind the fall of climate shifts, economic collapse, plagues, betrayals, and emperors who barely deserved the name. And then, just when you think it's all over, Rome reappears in the church, in kings, in the very structure of Europe. This isn't just the story of how Rome fell. It's the story of how an idea proved harder to kill than an empire. Let's break down the surprising, strange, and very real reasons behind the fall of one of history's greatest powers. Overstretch, inflation, and the curse of too much success. At its height, the Roman Empire spanned over 2 million square miles, from the windswept moors of Britain to the scorching sands of Egypt. The empire ruled over 60 million people, about 1/5 of the world's population at the time. Its road system stretched more than 250,000 miles. That sounds like success, but that success came with a deadly weight. To keep such a massive realm running, Rome needed administrators, tax collectors, governors, and above all, soldiers. Lots of soldiers. The army ballooned to over 400,000 men, and they had to be paid, housed, and fed. As the frontier stretched further and further out, the cost of protecting them became unsustainable. To fund this, emperors raised taxes, but then came the real blow: inflation. Desperate for cash, emperors like Gallienus and Aurelian began to debase the silver currency. The once trusty denarius became a coin with less than 2% silver by the late 3rd century. People noticed. Prices rose, and confidence in Roman currency collapsed. Worse, many rural farmers, who made up the majority of the empire, began abandoning their lands. Some were crushed by taxes. Others fled because of invasions or plague. That led to declining food production, which pushed prices even higher. Rome responded by fixing prices and tying workers to their land, a desperate attempt to stop economic freefall. But instead of helping, it created a kind of forced labor system that resembled early serfdom. Climate change played a role too. Studies of tree rings and ice cores showed that the late antique Little Ice Age brought colder, wetter weather to Europe around the 3rd century. Crops suffered, famines grew more common. Meanwhile, the Antonine Plague, 165 to 180 CE, and the Plague of Cyprian, 250 CE, devastated urban populations. The Antonine Plague alone may have killed 5 million people, including Lucius Verus and possibly Marcus Aurelius. Add to that the fact that Roman politics was a chaotic mess. Between 235 and 284 CE, there were 26 emperors, most of whom met violent ends. Generals seized power, lost it, or were killed by their own soldiers. Civil war after civil war drained Rome's strength. This wasn't a single stab wound. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Economic stress, inflation, climate change, disease, and a government losing control. Division, weak emperors, and the empire that split itself apart. By the late 3rd century, the empire was flailing. The borders were under constant attack, the treasury was shrinking, and the civil wars never stopped. Into this chaos stepped Diocletian, a former soldier who became emperor in 284 CE. He had one radical idea: split the empire. In 293 CE, Diocletian created the Tetrarchy, a system where 2 senior emperors, Augusti, and 2 junior emperors, Caesars, ruled different parts of the empire. The idea was simple: decentralize authority, respond faster to threats, and create an orderly succession. And for a time, it worked. But the moment Diocletian voluntarily abdicated in 305 CE, the system collapsed into yet another civil war. The most permanent change Diocletian made was dividing the empire into eastern and western halves. Eventually, the eastern half, richer, more urbanized, and more stable, outshone the west in every way. Its capital, Constantinople, founded by Constantine in 330 CE, became the true center of Roman power. The Western Empire, on the other hand, was a mess. Its capitals kept shifting, from Rome to Milan to Ravenna. Trade routes shifted eastward, draining wealth from the west. Many of the western provinces were poor, rural, and hard to defend. So when things got tough, they often had to fend for themselves. Emperors in the West were rarely strong. Take Honorius, who became emperor at just 10 years old. When Rome was sacked by the Visigoths in 410 CE, his handlers told him Rome has perished. He allegedly cried out, thinking they meant his pet chicken, also named Rome. This period also saw the rise of powerful military commanders like Stilicho, who often held more real power than the emperor. When Stilicho was executed in 408 CE due to court conspiracies, Rome lost one of its last true defenders. The Visigoths attacked soon after. Meanwhile, the Eastern Empire played its cards more carefully. It bought off invaders, fortified its cities, and built up reserves. Even as the West collapsed, the East, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, survived for another 1,000 years. Rome didn't fall as one empire. It fell in halves. Barbarians, betrayals, and the final blows. By the 4th century, the Roman Empire was already staggering. It had endured inflation, civil wars, and division. But the hammer that would finally bring the Western Empire crashing down wasn't Roman. It was foreign. Or so the Romans claimed. The so-called barbarians get most of the blame for Rome's fall. But let's start with the truth. The word barbarian didn't mean savage or uncivilized. It simply meant not Roman. And many of these so-called outsiders were Roman in every way but birthplace. They traded with Rome. They served in its armies. Some even wore Roman armor and spoke Latin. Take the Visigoths, for example. In 376 CE, they showed up at the Danube River, fleeing something terrifying, the Huns. These ruthless nomadic warriors had swept westward from Central Asia, crushing everything in their path. The Visigoths, tired, hungry, terrified, begged for asylum within Roman territory. Emperor Valens agreed to let them settle in the Balkans. But Roman officials, corrupt and cruel, saw a chance to profit. They overcharged the Goths for food, took their children as hostages, and even sold them dog meat. The result? The Visigoths rebelled. Just 2 years later, in 378 CE, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Visigoths delivered one of Rome's most humiliating defeats. Emperor Valens led a massive army to crush them, but he underestimated their strength and charged without reinforcements. His army was annihilated, and Valens himself was killed, reportedly burned alive in a farmhouse. According to Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, it was the beginning of the end. Rome was stunned. For centuries, its legions had crushed all foes. Now, a group of desperate refugees had shattered its illusions of invincibility. From that point forward, the empire began relying heavily on these outsiders, not just as enemies, but as mercenaries. Entire tribes were hired as foederati, allied soldiers who fought in exchange for land, pay, and promises of security. But these weren't disciplined Roman soldiers loyal to the Senate and people of Rome. These were warriors loyal to their leaders, cultures, and tribes. And when Rome couldn't pay or broke its promises, they revolted. One of the most famous examples? Alaric, king of the Visigoths. After years of fighting for and against Rome, he demanded land and status for his people. Rome refused. In 410 CE, Alaric and his troops marched into the Eternal City and sacked Rome. It wasn't a wild frenzy of destruction. In fact, Alaric tried to limit violence. Churches were spared. Some homes were untouched. But psychologically, it was devastating. Rome hadn't been invaded in over 800 years. St. Jerome, witnessing the aftermath, wrote, "If Rome can perish, what can be safe?" Rome recovered, but barely. The army was a patchwork of mercenaries. Its leadership was fragmented, and the enemies kept coming. The Vandals, another Germanic tribe, had migrated all the way from Central Europe through Gaul, Spain, and into North Africa. In 439 CE, they seized Carthage, one of Rome's most important cities and breadbaskets. They built a navy and became pirates of the Mediterranean. In 455 CE, they sailed into Italy and sacked Rome, this time far more brutally. Temples were looted. Citizens were enslaved. The word Vandal still means wanton destruction today. Meanwhile, the most terrifying threat yet had emerged: the Huns. Led by Attila, nicknamed the Scourge of God, the Huns struck terror across Europe. They didn't just raid, they annihilated. Entire towns vanished. Refugees flooded Roman borders, begging for protection. In 451 CE, Attila invaded Gaul, modern France. Rome's last great general, Flavius Aetius, assembled a desperate alliance of Romans, Visigoths, and other tribes to meet him. At the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains, they halted Attila's advance, but it was a bloodbath. Some estimate as many as 165,000 died. It was one of the last major victories for the Western Roman Empire. But what did Rome do to reward Aetius, their hero? They murdered him. In 454 CE, Emperor Valentinian III, jealous of Aetius's power and popularity, stabbed him to death in court. 1 year later, Valentinian was assassinated by Aetius's supporters. This was Rome's greatest failing, its inability to hold together its own leadership. While enemies closed in, internal betrayal and backstabbing continued unchecked. Soon, even emperors were powerless figureheads. The real power lay in the hands of barbarian generals. In 476 CE, a Germanic commander named Odoacer deposed the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus, a name so ironic it sounded like a parody. Romulus was a child placed on the throne by his father, who was himself a puppet of the military. When Odoacer removed him, there was no grand battle, no heroic last stand. The Roman Senate simply wrote to the Eastern emperor and said essentially, "We don't need a Western emperor anymore. One emperor is enough." And with that, the Western Roman Empire officially ended. But not with an explosion, with a shrug. And yet, even that's a bit misleading, because Rome didn't end in 476 for everyone. In places like Gaul, Spain, and North Africa, former Roman provinces were now ruled by Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, but many of them still called themselves Romans. They wore Roman clothing, they preserved Roman laws, some even minted coins with Roman emperors on them for decades. Rome hadn't simply been conquered, it had been absorbed. This wasn't the end of civilization, it was its transformation. The church, the transformation, and the empire that lived on. Here's a surprise, the Roman Empire didn't really end. Sure, the Western Roman political empire collapsed, but much of Roman culture, law, language, and even authority survived, just in new forms. One major reason? Christianity. The Roman Empire had been pagan for centuries, but in 312 CE, Constantine the Great converted to Christianity and legalized the faith with the Edict of Milan the following year. By the end of the 4th century, Christianity was the official religion of the empire. Roman temples were abandoned. Pagan festivals were replaced with Christian ones. Bishops became more powerful than governors. As civil authority crumbled, the church stepped in. When the empire fell, the pope remained. Latin continued to be spoken. Roman laws were copied and preserved. Even architecture, arches, domes, basilicas, remained a legacy of Rome. In the East, the Byzantine Empire, which called itself the Roman Empire, lasted until 1453. Its citizens called themselves Romans, even though they spoke Greek. Constantinople, the city Constantine built, became the heart of Orthodox Christianity and a beacon of Roman resilience. In the West, new kingdoms rose, but they all wanted Rome's legacy. The Franks, the Lombards, and even the early kings of England and Spain styled themselves after Roman successors. In 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans, reviving the imperial title. So while the empire as a political machine fell, the idea of Rome lived on. Roman identity didn't vanish, it evolved. Conclusion: Rome didn't fall in one day, from one cause or to one enemy. It fell like a dying star, burning bright, sputtering out slowly, and scattering pieces across history. Economic collapse, political chaos, climate shifts, deadly plagues, foreign armies, internal betrayals, all were threads in the unraveling tapestry. But even as the Western Empire fell, Rome's fingerprints remained on law, language, religion, and architecture. And that's the twist. Rome never really vanished. It transformed. So when we ask why Rome fell, we're really asking, how did a civilization this mighty become so vulnerable? And what can we learn from it? Maybe the lesson is that no power is eternal, that success must adapt, that even the strongest walls can fall if the foundations crack. Rome is gone, but its echoes still shape the world we live in. The empire ended. The idea of Rome, still marching. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about ancient Rome and its fall, check out our book, Roman Empire, a captivating guide to Imperial Rome and Pax Romana. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.